Jace, welcome to Mother Daughter Earthcast. We're so happy and excited to have you here. We, as I mentioned to you, heard about all of your amazing work with Nurdles through one of the news articles that Grant Brown from Happy Eco News highlighted. So I love getting to know what awesome people in our community are doing. And so thanks for agreeing to being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, we're excited. So for our listeners, could you tell them a little bit about your background and exactly what Nurdles are and just a little bit about your work with Nurdles to get us started?
Sure. Well, so I'm the director of the Mission-Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is actually a research and education program at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute. And so we're located in Port Aransas, Texas. And we do a number of different citizen science projects. One of them happens to be Nerdle Patrol. And so we started up Nerdle Patrol back in 2018 when there was a spill of plastic pellets that were showing up on the beach. And we quickly found out that the state agencies didn't have the resources to either clean it up or to monitor it to see how far it had spread or how long it would be on our beaches. So we started up asking volunteers to work with us to go out and just sample for 10 minutes when they're at the beach. And so by doing that, you get a concentration of pellets that you find within 10-minute period. And then we put it on a map that's color coded based on that concentration. And so you can sort of see where there's a number of things you can see with it. But one of the things is where the higher concentrations are, you can kind of guess that might be where the source is coming from. And so if you have enough data points, it can really show you kind of a big picture. And so once we got that going up in 2018, we immediately had different organizations throughout the Gulf of Mexico that wanted to get involved. And I mean, in every state in the US along the Gulf of Mexico, so that's all 5 states, even down into Mexico. So we had a university in Veracruz and then a nonprofit down in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so this was within a couple of weeks after starting. And so we had the entire Gulf of Mexico covered. And so really that's what kicked us off. And we've just been expanding and getting bigger since then.
That's amazing. And first of all, so I think I might have mentioned on the call when we chatted earlier, but I grew up in Mexico along the Gulf, and my mom lived there for 23 years.
23 years.
So we'll touch on this later, but we might have a school down there that could hopefully help too, because there's an area on the map along the coast of Tamaulipas where we didn't see there was any collection yet, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I get excited. Can you tell, because I'm sure not everyone listening knows what a Nerdle is. So can you explain what's a Nerdle, where the name came from, why they're bad, and why we need to be collecting and monitoring Nerdles?
Sure. So Nurdles are actually small plastic pellets, and they're the size of lentils. So they're these little bitty, and actually I have a little jar of them. I have about 400 of them that could fit in this little jar,
Wow.
Which is only about 1.5 inches tall, a little bitty thing. But that's how small they are. And these are the basis for everything plastic. So the computers we're on, the people's glasses that they wear, the dashboards in cars, anything made of plastic is first this little plastic pellet. And this is the amazing thing about these pellets is that these are the raw material. They've never even made it to their final destination of being melted down, added color, and made into a product. So they're getting out before that even happens. And the reason for that is because they're small, they're lightweight, the wind can carry them. If they get on the ground and it rains, it gets into the stormwater, eventually into our rivers, bays, and then out into the ocean. But the biggest impact is really to wildlife, fish and wildlife. So you can imagine once these things get into the waterways and then they're pushed back up on riverbanks or lake shorelines or on the beaches, they're available to birds to eat on. Whenever they're in the water, they're available to fish to eat and to sea turtles. And so there's been a number of studies that have been done over the last 30 years that have looked at the different species of birds, fish, and sea turtles that have eaten these. And so the Environmental Protection Agency came out with a report back in 1992 called Plastic Pellets in the Aquatic Environment, Sources and Recommendations. And in that report, they list over 80 species of birds that they knew about at the time that were eating these. There's been some stuff done on the Gulf of Mexico here looking at dead sea turtles and necropsies where they cut them open. And they found that over 7% of the 4 different species of sea turtles that they necropsied had pellets in their belly. And then also for fish. And the real kind of thing that we worry about, or the concerns we have, are that once these pellets are in the environment, they absorb harmful chemicals. And like DDT, PCBs, PAHs, you know, all these things you hear about that you don't want on your skin. You definitely don't want to eat these things. Well, when fish eat these, we definitely don't want those contaminants then being released from the pellets, getting through the stomach lining of the fish and into the muscle tissue that then we eat. And so that link has not been made yet. But with the technologies that we have and some of the research going on around the country, it's probably just a matter of years before we do know that answer.
Are you finding that some of the birds and fish are dying from eating so many pellets?
Yeah, so there's been documentation on that for years. And actually in that report I talked to you about, the Environmental Protection Agency report for 1992, you can open it up, and around page is somewhere in the 30s. You open it up and there's a black and white photo in there of the intestinal tract of a shorebird, and it has about 10 pellets in there. And so there's a couple of impacts. One is they can feed on these things. They think they're full. There is no nutritional value to them, so then they can starve to death. The other thing is if they eat enough of these, it can entangle their intestinal tract, and then they just can't eat anything, and they end up dying. And then the chemicals, we know that the chemicals that absorb into these plastics, and when released, they can have behavioral changes. Same with even just eating them. Leave out the chemicals, they can still have behavioral changes from eating these plastics. And so whenever behavior changes, that changes how they interact with opposite sex, and then reproduction. So there's a whole chain reaction that can happen. And all this is documented. Nerdle Patrol doesn't do any studies on animals as of yet. There's other institutions that have done that and are doing that right now that we're talking with. But this is all stuff that they've come up with. And so we always get from the media, ask us, you know, where are you getting all your information from? And so we ended up putting together a literature cited list of peer-reviewed publications that we get all of our information from. So we're not going to, you know, GQ magazine or something like that to figure out how plastics are impacting us, right? No, we're going to scientific publications. And so on the University of Texas Marine Science Institute homepage, there's something called highlights there. And those are just news stories about research and programs that we're doing. Well, if you click on that highlights link, it'll take you through, and you can see one of the little highlights there is the literature cited about plastics impacting not only humans, but animals, the ecology, things like that. And so that's a good resource for people if they want to know more about, you know, how plastics are impacting the environment.
Awesome. I'll definitely link that in the show notes for our listeners.
Mariana and I were talking about this before we started visiting with you. I went to a Nerdle factory down in Tampico.
This is why we want to recruit people from Tampico, because that's where they're being produced.
So, yeah.
BASF has a big factory down there.
Yeah. So I went to a Nerdle factory probably about 15 years ago down there. And it's like, oh, so this is how plastic is, you know, first sourced. And then you start, you know, we try to get plastic out of our lives, but we don't even have to get the plastic in our hands and there's plastic pollution. It's just insidious how plastic is reaching into so many aspects of our lives, isn't it?
Right. Well, I mean, it's really low cost, and there are some really good uses for plastic, but then there's also some really bad ones. So grocery bags that we just use for 15 minutes to be able to get our groceries in the house, you know, straws or water bottles. You know, in the US, 99.9% of the water is safe to drink out of the tap, out of your water hose. It's like, why are we putting it into these plastic bottles, drinking it down, and then 15 seconds later throwing it away? It makes no sense whatsoever.
No sense. No sense. Don't even get it started on the water bottle. Jace, if you get my mom on the water bottle soapbox, she doesn't come off of it. So
I
we
know.
won't get her started.
Before COVID, I had gatherings at my house often, and so many times people say, "Oh, well, I'll bring bottles of water," and my response is always, "I have glasses,
Yeah.
and I have running water. You don't do that." But anyway, that's not why we're here.
No, back to Nurdles. Can you tell us what it's like to go out and look for Nurdles and collect them? And I know in the bonus material, you're going to show our patrons all about, the kit that you give to organizations, but let's just say someone's out collecting Nurdles. Can they collect them without one of your kits? And what is that process like?
Sure. I mean, so that's the beauty of this program actually, is that it costs $0. So people that are already going down to the river or they're going down to the beach, they can go out and they can do their survey without any materials whatsoever. And so they can use their hand to pick up pellets from the high tide line. And once they find their first Nerdle, they start their clock for 10 minutes. And then once the 10 minutes is over, they count up how many Nerdles they have, the location they're at, the date they were there, and then they go to Nerdalpatrolorg to put their information in. And then once they put their information into the reporting sheet, their data automatically shows up on a map. And so they can click on the map, and it's like a Google Earth type platform where they can zoom in to where they were at, or they can zoom all the way out to show the entire world. So, anyone in the world can put data into this thing. But then there's this feature that allows them to print. And so they can print it digitally or hard copy. And what's important about this is that it's really, you go out, you do your survey, and you put your information in there, and you kind of wonder, what will this ever be used for? Well, this is the beauty of it, is that an individual or an organization can go in to their community, they can print up the problem of plastic pellets in their community, and they can immediately that day take it and email it off to their elected official or their state agency and say, look, we got a problem here. We think we know where the problem's coming from. They can do a complaint to their state agency that's supposed to be regulating these entities. There's all different kinds of things people can do immediately after they put their data into this reporting system.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you made the point to say anyone can do this. You don't need a special kit or special equipment. Just go out with, your hands. You don't even need anything more than that. So and it's amazing that you guys have created the platform to make it so easy for people to send you their data and send you, the information that they've collected. So thanks for doing that. And while you were talking, it made me think of another question that we were kind of toying around with before we chatted, which was, let's say the goal is, and I know I want to talk about your overall, legislation changing goal throughout this, but let's just say the goal is to remove 100% of the Nerdles on the planet of the Earth. Are there any larger scale technologies that are being developed in order to be able to do that? Or is it really more of a manual process at this point?
The plastics industry, they have vacuum trucks. So when there's a big spill, they can come in, they can suck all that up. They have backpack, like the blowers you have at your house, they have those that are vacuums. And so they can go in and clean up spills. So the technology's there. There are a few different companies that have come up with vacuum trailers or different ways to be able to suck up and separate out, because that's the thing is, you think about where all these pellets come ashore, there's natural debris that these are in too. So you want to be able to separate all that stuff out, or you want to definitely separate out all the sand or rocks that you pick up too. And so they're developing these different technologies. It's all vacuum related to where it separates out the plastic pellets from the natural stuff.
Nice.
And so there's 3 companies I know about that have contacted me and asked me, how they can use it. Is there any place that I know about in the U.S.? There is one company that's in the U.S. The others are other parts of the world.
Nice. So in theory, if you find a hotspot and you identify the source, could there be public pressure or, legislative pressure to make those plastic manufacturing companies do regular cleanups with these technologies?
Yeah, I've actually had industry folks take me out to lunch and say, hey, we want to be a part of Nerdle Patrol and we'd be willing to fund a cleanup effort on a
Nice.
large scale, not just getting, 100 volunteers together, but hiring consultants to come in with the proper equipment and just cleaning the beach, big sections of it. Whenever we get a report of there being really high concentrations of pellets coming in. And then COVID hit, and they never called me back. So.
Yeah.
But I have had different discussions with them still. But the oil and gas industry has really been hit hard by like everybody has.
Yeah.
So what was the other question? Because I had something good I was going to say.
So I know when we chatted on the phone, I asked, and this is on your website, one of your main goals is to be able to use this data to go to Congress and ask for changes in legislation and make, standards stricter for these companies. So can you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So in every state except for California, the states are the ones that regulate the plastic industry manufacturing. And not only just the manufacturers, but in many cases, anyone who handles the pellets. So there's also transportation industry. There's also the people that are just gathering the Nurdles up to package them up and distribute them. So there's distributors. And then there's the actual factory that takes the pellets to melt them down and make an actual product. So there's all throughout the supply chain, there's a way for these to get out. But only California has in their permit specifically about plastics getting out into the environment. So calling for zero plastics getting out into the environment. So in Texas, for example, the permits for these facilities say that they are allowed a trace amount of suspended solids. So it never even mentions plastic, and it says that they are allowed suspended solids. Part of the problem is plastic pellets are not considered hazardous material. So that needs to change at the federal level. Now at the state level, we need to get states that are the agencies that are regulating these companies to change that permit language to say zero plastic pellet, flakes, and powders are allowed to be released into the environment. Because that allows regulators like inspectors to go in, do their inspection. If they find any plastic pellets at all, there's a fine associated with it. And then there's mitigation that they can go through and say, you need to put up filters, or you need to make storage ponds, or, there's a lot of best management practices out there that can be put into place. And so as it is right now, the company can say, oh, that's just a trace amount. And so to give you an example of what a company might say about a trace amount, in Texas, you probably heard of the Formosa Plastics lawsuit that Diane Wilson had sued. So in that case, Formosa Plastics said that a trace amount of plastic pellets to them is 10,000 pellets per day per outfall. They have 12 outfalls. So they said 120,000 pellets per day is a trace amount to them. Now, luckily, the judge said, no, that's not good enough. But that's just an example that I'm giving of real world of what a trace amount could be. And that's why the laws need to be changed to say zero plastic pellet.
Interesting. I was looking at your website, and there was a couple of things I noticed I wanted to ask you about. One of the questions is whenever you're looking at the map, most all the sightings are along the Gulf of Mexico, except in Dallas. There's an outcropping in Dallas, and I was like, how did that happen? So could you explain why there's a hot spot in Dallas?
Yeah, and it's actually an interesting story because, we were getting these Nerdle Patrol startup kits that we were putting together from a grant we had gotten from the Formosa settlement. And we were sending these out to different organizations. And this organization called the Inland Ocean Coalition got a hold of me and said, we're up in Dallas and, we know we're not at the coast, but we'd still like to be involved. Can we get a Nerdle kit? And I thought about it, and I said, well, let's get on a Zoom call and let's talk about, what you'd actually be doing. Because in these kits, there's sampling jars. And so if somebody's not going to be sampling, maybe we could modify the kit. So we got on a Zoom call and opened up Google Earth and zoomed in. And it turns out there's plastic manufacturing companies all over the place in Dallas. And so we decided, well, why don't you go out and try to sample at least one spot? And if you find some, then, we'll send you a kit. Sure enough, the first place they went, they found a lot of plastic pellets right outside the facility that made plastic pellets.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, they've actually gone into the tributary that the stormwater goes into from that facility. They've gone down to the lake that tributary actually drains into. They found plastic pellets all the way along the way. And now they've actually gone to other facilities and they're finding plastic pellets around every one they're sampling by.
Mm.
And so, this doesn't have to just be a coastal thing. You don't just have to live by a river or something like that. I mean, this is widespread. And so you think about railroad tracks and it being a spider web across the United States. You could expect to find plastic pellets along all those railways. There's been over 100 surveys that have been done along railways, and we ask volunteers don't go on railways because it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But some people are doing it, and we've got a lot of data showing that it's bad. There's plastic pellets along all the railways. So
Wow.
these things are spilling out all along the way, either in transit or when the rail car is coming back to the facility.
Interesting. Okay. The other item that I saw on your website that I found interesting is that, you have a timeline about Nurdles being found and whatever. And there was a huge spike, in August of this year? Huge
Right.
spike. And why?
Well, so all the plastic surveys that have come in have been, people going out and looking for plastic pellets and then doing their 10-minute surveys. In early August, there was a spill. So there was a container ship in the Mississippi River off of New Orleans that spilled Nurdles. And I mean, it was like 25 tons. It was a lot of Nurdles. They were finding bags of them. But that's why you see this spike is that, people would send in data of finding 500,000 pellets in 20 minutes.
What?
And so I emailed them and said, is this accurate? And they said, oh yeah. And they sent pictures, and the pictures were the shoreline or the riverbank was just solid Nurdles, and they were picking them up by the handful and putting them in buckets. And then they estimate, based on weight of how many pellets there were. But I mean, that's why you see those spikes. And there was probably, 2 or 3 days where there was those massive numbers, because then the river comes and starts taking a bunch of it away. But initially, I mean, it was just thick. And so a lot of that, we would expect to start seeing out the Mississippi River. So depending on which way the current's going, it could end up on the Mississippi shoreline or even down in Texas. And so we'll probably, if we haven't already seen some of those, we probably will soon.
Oh, it just kind of takes my breath away.
Yeah, definitely.
On a slightly different note, but still talking about Nerdles, obviously, we have quite a few listeners and people in our community on Instagram that live in the UK. And we were reading that the Great Nerdle Hunt was started in the UK, from what we read. Are y'all affiliated with them at all? Is your work part of this global Nerdle Hunt? Is it all under one umbrella in some sense? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so FIDRA is the nonprofit out of Scotland that runs the Great Nerdle Hunt, and they do great work. I think that their program's been going since about 2013, okay. And I actually had a lot of conversations with them prior to starting the Nerdle Patrol up, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a duplication of effort. And so I talked with our researchers at the university, and there's a couple of key differences between the Great Nerdle Hunt and then our program. And so the Great Nerdle Hunt actually takes all of our data and incorporates it into theirs. Nice. We cannot do that with the data that they have, and that's for a couple of different reasons. One is the methodology, and so our methodology is stricter, because we wanted our data to be used for 2 primary reasons: future research and in litigation. And so all of our data is standardized to a 10-minute for one person that's collecting. Now, people can go out in a group of 100 people and put all their data in together, but our program automatically splits it up. And in that way, when you look at the map and the colored dots, all those colored dots are for one person for 10 minutes and the concentration they collected. That way you can compare anywhere in the world, one site to another. So with the Great Nerdle Hunt, you can, and you can only use your hand with ours. And so with the Great Nerdle Hunt, they don't do specific numbers. It's a range. You can use any kind of tool you want to go out, because remember, theirs is more for awareness and advocacy.
Okay.
And so, and they do a really good job of that. They have annually, they do a global Nerdle hunt within a week period, and we always take part in that. And we ask that our volunteers submit data not only to Nerdle Patrol, but also the Great Nerdle Hunt, because they've got key partners all across the globe trying to change policy and laws that way. So it's a really good partnership. And you'll see on our solutions page that we have a section dedicated to the Great Nerdle Hunt.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that y'all are collaborating. We always say the more the merrier, and the more people can collaborate, the better. So that's awesome. Okay, well, Mom always asks her one question to all of our guests, but before we pass it on to Mom to start wrapping it up, Jace, how can people help, get in touch, learn more? What are the call to action for our listeners and how they can get involved?
I'd say the best thing for them to do is to go to nerdalpatrol.org, and we've created all the tools necessary for them to be able to learn how to do a survey, what to do once you get your plastic pellets, and how to enter your data. And then on the solutions page, we have in there about the call to action, and really working with the state agencies on changing policy. And so we currently in Texas have a Texas Nerdle bill that we're pushing forward through this next legislative session. And so if somebody wants a copy of that, because they want to do the similar type thing in their state, this is a template for them. So they can just email me and I'll send them a copy of that.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, y'all, you heard that. Nerdalpatrol.org, and I'll obviously link it all in the show notes. And go to the solutions page and do something about Nerdles. This is so awesome and exciting. Thanks, Jace.
And on your website, I was watching your video on how to collect the Nerdles. It's so easy.
Yeah.
It is so easy.
People are going to the beach already. Why not spend 10 minutes and, get something accomplished while you're there?
Well, in fact, I've been wanting to go see the cranes down in your neck of the woods one winter, and I'm like, I want to go see the cranes, and I want to collect Nerdles. I want to look for Nerdles. Get rid of them. I have very exciting goals in life. And one last question: how many people do you have regularly in the Nerdle Patrol? And tell us how many people are helping you.
So currently we have over 2,300 volunteers that have sent data in, and we're just over 6,900 surveys that have been completed around the country. And, the more data you have, the more you can see where the problem is, and probably the better chance you have of making changes. And so that's what we try to tell people is like, you might just be going out there for doing one survey, but it really can make a difference, because that might be a place that we don't have any information. Yeah. And it shows a bigger picture of what's going on.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Okay. Now we're down to the final question.
The question.
What do you think is the most important thing each person can do to help reverse global warming and help climate change?
Well, I think we really got to you got to look at your lifestyle. And you got to have start thinking differently about the things that you're using. And so I know at my house, and this sounds crazy, probably because I am a little crazy, but we, instead of using napkins, we use cloth napkins. Same with paper towels. We have towels. And so we might do more laundry, but we don't have that waste stream. Even for, say, our trash cans, we have an old pillowcase that is the liner for the trash cans.
Oh.
And so then we just, dump it out and reuse it or wash it if it needs to be washed. The easy things are when you go to the grocery store, you use a reusable bag, a straw. You don't need those straws. The water bottles is a big thing. That one is huge. Get a reusable water bottle. Those are some of the simple things that we can do at home that will lessen the demand for plastic, which the petrochemical industry is a big contributor to some of the issues we're seeing with climate change and things like that. So, anything we can do to lessen the demand for those products, the better.
I love that.
Perfect.
We were actually just talking about that the other day, that we want people to really, know and believe that there is no change that is too small, because you multiply that by the billions of people that we have on the planet, and then you get some real change. So I love that answer, that it just, it starts with your everyday decisions and the way you choose to, live your life and consume as well. So thanks, Jace. Okay.
And our pocketbooks can say a lot. I know that whenever I go to the grocery store, I've started seeing potatoes wrapped in plastic. Are you kidding me? Why does one potato, each potato is wrapped in plastic? Do you think I'm going to buy that?
No.
Heck no.
No. Go potato free that week.
Well,
anyway, we digress.
Yes, I did. Okay.
Well, we're excited to move on to the bonus material and get an inside scoop and peek into your Nerdle kit. So we're gonna, for those of you who are members of Patreon, head over there for the bonus, and for those of you who aren't, then sign up. But anyways, Jace, thank you so much for this time. This was amazing. I learned so much about Nerdles. I'm now a Nerdle enthusiast, and I'm sure that our listeners feel the same way. So thanks for sharing your time with us.
A Nerdle collection enthusiast.
Yes, Nerdle collection enthusiast.
Well, thank y'all very much.